So the astrology of the week of 17 May 2021 through 23 May 2021, it's a turning point week because of the retrograde station of Saturn, which is very often associated in the older texts with turning points, particularly in the astrology of the larger world. And the moon will remain under pressure this week, except for this sweet Virgo moon transit. We get a waxing moon through that earthy particularity of Virgo. And so I think it's a productive time, at least during that transit, to prepare for eclipse season, which we are launching into very shortly here. So let's get into the charts. Let's get into the week. The first thing to note about this week is that it's very much this Saturn station moment, like I said, and it's big news, okay? And it happens here on Sunday. At the very end of the week, Saturn will actually station retrograde, but it's going to be stationing and very slow already. And you can see in the larger picture, in the larger world, the real intensity out there with so much going on. I was thinking this week, I almost feel kind of bad in a way talking about astrology, just because there's such intense headlines out there, so much suffering, so much carnage in the world. And I try to keep my politics separated as much as I can, but it's very hard this week seeing the atrocities and the violations of international law in the Middle East. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But this is the kind of mundane climax that a Saturn station can bring, and we're here. It's this week. The other thing is that we're building into eclipse season, like I said, and Jupiter's role now in Pisces has come to enlarge in things and come to deliver things that maybe we aren't ready for, haven't been ready for. And I've been thinking a lot about this Jupiter in Pisces moment as being breakthroughs of truth, as being the kind of delivery of wisdom and truth. But remember, that often comes through pain and suffering. And so the real challenges we've seen since the Jupiter ingress may be that that's exactly the delivery system that Jupiter wants to bring to us in Pisces. And Pisces is a water sign, so we're talking about emotion, we're talking about feeling things. And when we deal with the land of emotion and feeling, we're dealing with, again, potentially discomfort as a way for truth to emerge and deliver its goodness to us. But let's just check out the week here. So on Monday, we've got the Venus conjunction with the North Node. This may bring strangeness to the love life or relationships. It may kind of expand or cause certain interactions to wobble, or our ability to access pleasure to kind of wobble. And remember, this is where Venus was last year during its retrograde here in Gemini. So there could be relational themes that are extending from last year, or relational lessons. I think Venus and Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini and Mercury is here also in Gemini, this can often be about reviewing, writing, analyzing relationships, even just thinking, what do I need? What do I want? This kind of analytical model that we can bring in our connective and pleasurable side. So that happens right there on Monday in the evening here in Central Europe. And then we're dealing with Venus trining Saturn. So Venus will be in an inferior position. Saturn will make that overcoming trine from Aquarius. And this is, again, a big feature of all eclipse season, particularly that solar eclipse in Gemini, which will have the Saturn trine. It's the structure of thought. And I think about Gemini sometimes as being out of control. It has this reputation of maybe a propensity, I was going to say, but I mean just an expansive thought that can kind of be unwieldy, and it's going from one thought to the next, the double-bodied sign that is Gemini. And so Saturn making that trine aspect, which is a useful aspect, a constructive aspect, can maybe bring structure to our thought forms. And that's why, what I was saying, when we do like a relationship inventory or any kind of inventories about our lives, it can often be good to just have like a notebook and a pen and, like deliberately say, okay, what are my goals, or put things on paper so it can take form, so it can be held in some kind of container And so it's just not flitting about such that it's lost or gets lost. And so this Venus-Saturn trine, I think, can be useful and constructive. You might think about, I'm hearing some friends telling me about, what are we, this kind of conversation, in a relationship, setting or some rules of engagement or defining a relationship. That can be Saturn as a definition. As soon as we put a word on something, it takes the form and the associations that word brings to a situation. And so that is happening, let's see, I think we're Thursday there, on the 20th. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday the 20th, very early in the morning, that Saturn-Venus trine perfects. And it prepares the ground because only hours later, 19 hours later, 18 hours later, the sun comes into Gemini. And now we'll have the stellium in Gemini, Venus, Mercury, and the sun there preparing first for a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, and then that next half of the lunation cycle, we get the solar eclipse in Gemini. I think that's 10 June. But the next syzygy I'll be talking about next week will be this lunar eclipse. And so we're starting to now get this pile up in Gemini. And where is that in your chart? What house is that? And this is where you can begin to kind of say, where will what's my eclipse story? What's that house? So for example, if it's 10th house, maybe you'll have unexpected turns or beginnings and endings at your job or career with your reputation. It's just one example, and maybe related to mercurial type things because these are Gemini eclipses. So thought, analysis, even games or children, that whole list of significations that Mercury brings. And so this is here on Thursday. Now we are feeling the overweight sense of the thought form and of that Mercury energy. So, what are some strategies to ground and to cope with thinking? Thinking can often be where the enemy is. It's in the mind, right? We create the monsters in our own thought forms. That's why in the Tarot you have the suit of swords, which corresponds to air, some of the most difficult cards. It's these cards depicting great suffering. It's because the mind is this great, generator of fear. What's the acronym? Fear, false evidence appearing real. I love that for maybe the darker side of Gemini. And eclipses, like we were talking about earlier with Jupiter, eclipses can sometimes bring us into a confrontation with the significations of that sign, such that we are offered a window to move through into the next phase of our reality, or to upgrade our lives, on this journey of improvement, or just the journey of life. Time is moving forward, and so look for maybe opportunities to challenge and question your own thought forms, your own linguistic embedded linguistic models for reality and for your life. Wear those loosely. Let the eclipse energy kind of transform those, would be my advice. And then we get on Friday, the sun in Gemini now receiving an overcoming square from Jupiter and Pisces. And this is, I think, a big part of the Jupiter and Pisces story so far, is that it is squaring the Gemini sector. Pisces and Gemini are in a square relationship. They're both mutable signs. And so this Pisces ingress of Jupiter has felt, strange. I don't know about you. I've been lackadaisical, kind of lethargic, almost out to sea was the best phrase I could think of. It's just like floating on this massive ocean and a little bit discombobulated. And I think it has to do with those nodes being squaring Pisces right now by sign, and then that stellium that will be in Gemini here later in the week, it's making Jupiter take on a little bit more responsibility with respect to eclipse season. Remember, there's a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, the other sign that that Jupiter rules. So Jupiter is really not, it's not free reign here with Jupiter and Pisces. It's got some responsibilities to manage the wonky eclipse season and then to square this Gemini energetic. And it's earlier in zodiacal order, and so Jupiter's kind of encasing this Gemini, this Jupiter and Pisces, with the sense of these greater truths, these greater emotional truths about reality. And so it's tough. It's really a lot of responsibility to say, where is this kind of higher truth in something, and to feel it. Feel it in the body, or feel it in, the soul. And so I'm just thinking here how Jupiter, eclipse season is already kind of faded and larger than life. Jupiter makes things even bigger, and so there's a sense of just a lot of activity. And remember, we're in the summer months, and we're in that Gemini season where we're built. It's not summer, I guess, fully, but we're getting into summer, late spring, and so there's just this sense of expansion here in the Northern Hemisphere. Don't want to forget about you folks down under. But this is the symbolism, and it'd be curious. I've always wanted to know what it's like to experience a fall down there in the OZ, or in some of those lands down there in like Southern Africa, and just this is this symbolic idea of expansion. How has that felt, even when the seasons are fall down in that part of the world? But we're kind of moving out in the Northern Hemisphere, a lot more activity, a lot more of that solar activity in the growth phase that can come with the seasons. So I just think about eclipse season, it's like a train we can't disembark from. Maybe my favorite metaphor, we're not getting off of it during eclipse season. We're on for the ride, we're strapped in maybe against our will, and we have to let fate run its course. And so letting go may be a wonderful strategy. Let go, let God. I've heard that before. I really like that. Letting reality do its work with us and to us. And that Jupiter in Pisces may mean the difficulty sometimes in surrendering. That difficulty is where, like I was saying earlier, how truth wants to be delivered. And so just hang on. Eclipse seasons, I think that's one of my favorite phrases too about eclipse seasons, hanging on. Because, invariably, I always say, slow down, do the mantras. And I will be putting on, for the lunar eclipse coming up here, K2 mantras. You can just find them in YouTube. I will be putting some of those on to get into the K2 energy and try to just get into more of a devotional practice. But I always intend to do that, and then life just gets crazy. And so it's just a matter of hanging on. So hang on out there. And keep in mind that Jupiter is in that superior position for these eclipses, flooding Gemini and the Gemini placements. And we're going to start feeling that here on Friday, when the Sun in Gemini receives that overcoming square from Jupiter in Pisces. So look for that. And then Sunday on the 23rd, we get that Saturn station. I expect this week to be more climaxing with all of the things that are in play in the world. The Middle East crisis, the crisis in Palestine, situations with the openings and closings and the protests and variants and all of that stuff. As we get into the Saturn station and then eclipse season, we're sort of this watershed climax moment. I think after eclipse season here, we're going to get into the summer, and then Jupiter will come back into Aquarius by midsummer. So this might be this sort of moment where we sort of the wave is cresting here into eclipse season, and we'll know a lot more about how the rest of the year is going to go, I think, by about July 1st. So let me come here now. The moon, what's the moon doing this week? Always talking about the moon, always following the moon. The moon's heading into its eclipse moment, the lunar eclipse, like I've said, but this week is that waxing phase before the eclipse, and it's a little bit under pressure again. First, it's co-present with Mars to start the week right now as I sit here. On Monday, so about, 12, 13 hours from now, the moon will enter Leo and oppose the sun. Oppose Saturn. It'll be ruled by the sun, but it'll be opposing Saturn. So co-present with Mars, opposing Saturn, which is a challenge for the moon. And then we get this Virgo moon, which I think is the best and sweetest opportunity we've had in a little while. That Virgo moon starts on Wednesday and finishes on Saturday. So we have this long Virgo moon because the moon is slower right now in this part of the sky. And the reason why I love it, and then we finish the week with a Libra moon, which is then square Mars. So this Virgo moon is the only pocket where we have safety from both Mars and Saturn all week. And there's a long stretch of it. But the reason why I love it is that the moon will be opposite Jupiter, and we love oppositions with the benefics. They can see the moon and give it strength, even if there is a little bit of oppositional tension. It's often a positive. Seeing truth straight on, and I think this fits with the theme of the Virgo moon. We're having to look at difficult truths that are trying to give us something. And then you also have both ruler Mercury and Venus, the other benefic, in Gemini, making that nice overcoming square. So the moon is received by its ruler, and both benefics are giving the moon some dynamic activation there in Virgo. And I think about this as of eclipse season preparation. Remember, the train we can't disembark from, like I said earlier. Well, what can we do? We're on the ride, we're strapped in. Think about a plane when you're taking off. Sometimes you have that book with you. You can read your book, write something. I see people working, maybe just get into some visioning or imaginal work. That can be Virgo. Or just cleaning spaces. I love that for Virgo energy. I think about the Hermit Tarot card, which is a card associated with Virgo, but that guy's in a field and he's thinking about wisdom. He's got his light of his heart and his wisdom, but in a field where things are growing. And so maybe you need to kind of tend to your garden a little bit here as this eclipse season is ramping up. It can be a good time when we're strapped in to just kind of tend to what's around us as a coping mechanism. So that's what I'm looking for this Virgo moon. Again, best moon of the week. It's waxing, so maybe we can get into some projects or kind of launch pad some things as this eclipse season is arriving. I think it's the last opportunity really to do and engage before the shutting down that I always try to do with eclipse season. Is just kind of intentionally not do things as much as possible and just ride out and feel the power of this reality we're in. The planets block each other out. They're perfectly aligned. Feels kind of trippy to me. Feels like it's almost constructed that way. Maybe we're evidence of the simulation. But when these eclipses come, it's almost like, wow, look at this profound and potent kind of mystery that we're encased in. I try to center that contemplation. So, okay, that is the weekly astrology. I hope you have a wonderful week as you're getting into your eclipse season. And let's pull some tarot cards. Let's see what the tarot symbolism might offer us. And I need to get my random number generator. I'll be right back. Okay, I am back. And let's get that first card. All right, so the first card is, let's see here, where are we? There we go. First card is the King of Hearts. Boy, I love seeing that King of Hearts. This can correspond to Cancer in this correspondence system, but it's the water sign. And I think it jibes quite well with the idea I was sharing about earlier about how emotional truths can often come through those water signs, that those water signs can be about the emotional body. And I think about emotions as kind of ripples, there's usually something there of high significance, whether that's like the nature of pain, the truth of suffering that the Buddhists would say, that first noble truth of suffering, and that deep pain. And this can be traumas, things that happened way before there's a remnant in us. They can often be installed in the body. And then there's these ripples of emotion, and they can get triggered by the outer world. And this idea of the King of Hearts. But when those ripples happen, those painful emotional ripples, it's a way to I believe our body's processing and wanting that pain to be seen, integrated, and bringing this divine presence that we have the capacity for, bringing that pain to be seen by that divine part of ourselves to heal. And so I think about this king as someone who's gone through many iterations of this emotional process to where he's now stable, centered, and can use and sort of hone that emotional part of himself for the benefit of all. And in the Tarot Major Arcana, this King of Hearts is the Chariot. If you see that Chariot card, it's that beautiful, powerful person who's has an ability to move within this realm. And I think it's because of a centered and stabilized emotional state. Cancer is a water sign. Jupiter's now in Pisces in a water sign. And so this is in the recent past position. I know this Pisces ingress of Jupiter has felt a little emotional and a little difficult. A lot of people were sleepy, I was reading on Twitter. A lot of really tough news that's triggering emotionally. And so I would just say, let it take us, let us feel it and see it and call it for what it is, so we can kind of integrate it. And that is maybe the opportunity here with Jupiter and Pisces overcoming the Cancer sectors of our chart by that overcoming trine. So let me get the second card. Let me see what else is here. Okay, this one is... And I always pull from my two different decks. I like to mix up decks, and that way we have, just a little bit of a different energetic. Interesting, this is Temperance. This is a lovely card, balancing the water in Temperance. You can see it there, water being emotion. And we know when to feel pain. We know when to hold space. We know when to be destabilized by it. We know when to stand up in strength and look on that difficult and challenging truth. Remember, the moon in Virgo opposite Jupiter in Pisces. And this corresponds to Sagittarius, another Jupiter-ruled sign. So it's this theme of facing difficulty, facing emotional suffering, letting it, transform us into more wise people. That's what these emotional ripples are there for. We can become more wise and hold space for others. Remember, you are someone else's Jupiter. That's what these Jupiter transits can also be. When Jupiter gets very strong, it's like, how can we be more generous? How can we deliver truth or hold space or care for people in a way that they feel loved by and gifted by us, So who are you going to be Jupiter for this week? Maybe that's another part of your eclipse season. It's not always about us. Sometimes these transits and even our own charts are about other people. And so it's good to think about that side of generosity and that side of abundance. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. But getting into this kind of deeper, spiritualized, truthful side of Jupiter and the difficulty that can imply often is, I think, the big theme of this week and the big theme of eclipse season. Hang in there. Have a lovely week, and we'll talk very, very soon. As always, you can go to my website, sjanderson144.com, book readings, schedule readings with me. I do tarot readings. I do astrology readings. Just click here to schedule a reading right on top. I love meeting you, and I would love to work with you. So again, have a wonderful and lovely week, and we'll talk very, very soon.